first systematic review, interestingly, on carbohydrate requirements for strength trainees. And our main finding, I would say, in terms of novel news in one sentence would be that traditional carbohydrate recommendations for strength trainees are probably excessive, if not wildly excessive, because based on the majority of research, there aren't that many benefits, if any, of consuming higher versus lower carbohydrate intakes. Even ketogenic diets perform very respectably without significant differences with higher carbohydrate intakes in terms of performance and long-term strength development. And the relatively scant research there is, the cited minority of studies that do find significant benefits of higher versus lower carbohydrate intakes, they are all non-calorie equated. And in the majority of them, the higher carbohydrate intake group is the only group that's consuming something. And the comparison is basically one group had a meal before their workout in the morning and the other group did not. And there is research showing that that may induce psychological effects, and hunger might be a factor. And there's also a psychological effect in the sense of people that think they need the carbohydrates might actually need them, or they sort of defeat themselves mentally if they don't have them when they think they do need them. Kind of like pre-workouts, people that forget their pre-workout and then they think, oh, I can't perform today, even though there are very few active ingredients in the actual product, their pre-workout. So I think that was actually, I expected these results, but the research consensus was even clearer, and the evidence for the case for higher intakes was even weaker than I thought.
Okay. So when you think about the recommendations, are you thinking about a specific gram per kilogram of body weight that you would probably be thinking, well, if you go over that 3 grams per kilogram of body weight, I think just going way too much, or do you recommend maybe going lower, or maybe just less huge priority to that high carbohydrate pre-workout meal that people think that it is so essential for the gains?
With a few caveats, namely that someone is not training twice a day, that they are only doing strength training, so they're going to the gym lifting weights, doing powerlifting, bodybuilding, or Olympic weightlifting, but not soccer or tennis or whatever. They are not training fasted, so they do have a meal before they lift, and we concretely recommend at least 15 grams of carbohydrates and at least 0.3 grams per kilogram protein, so just generally 20 grams high quality protein or so, within 3 hours before your training session. If you do that, then your total daily carbohydrate intake might be completely moot. In fact, literally all of the short-term studies and all but one of the long-term studies found that carbohydrate intake did not impair long-term performance. And that might be because any effect that there would be might be compensated in the short term, might be compensated for by adaptations to a lower carbohydrate intake.
So if you were to think about those who actually maybe spend more than an hour in the gym, I would say let's put an example of the power lifters that you see them having some candy, some carbohydrates, rapid carbohydrates straight away within their training. Is that something that might be beneficial, or you reckon it is just more like a placebo effect, or just a bad habit of eating something in the meantime you're waiting for your sets?
Both. I think, interestingly, it might be beneficial, but not because you're actually consuming more carbohydrates that provide fuel substrate for the exercise. It might be beneficial because it is a placebo effect, and because there might be a spark of pleasure or well-being, a positive affect, as psychologists would call it, that can make you train harder. So research has found that a double tap punch to the idea that it was the high carbs is that first research found you don't actually need to consume the carbohydrates. If you rinse the carbohydrates in your mouth, multiple studies show it can also improve performance. And then research afterwards showed that it doesn't even need to be carbohydrates that you consume, or not consume, a rinse in your mouth. It can also be artificially sweetened soda or a beverage. So that really takes the whole idea of it being carbohydrates out of it and shift the focus to psychological effects, which the main benefit would be that anything that increases your well-being can make you push harder. So humans have limited self-control in the sense of our well-being gets drained by doing things that are difficult or things we don't like. If we're in the gym, you're by definition, if you're training hard, you're pushing past your comfort zone. So some people, especially if you're not super hardcore motivated, you might benefit from that little extra boost of drinking something pleasurable or doing something in between sets could have similar effect. There's also research, for example, that watching porn or violence before your workouts can increase performance. And that's
Oh, wow.
obviously not a physical effect. It's just because when people watch these things, they get more physically aroused. And then because they're in that state, they're in a better state to train hard.
It could be the same like listening to rock or the music that makes you be very pumped. I think
Yes.
that's something that I've seen a lot of lifters doing is they listen to a very heavy metal song or something like that before they lift, and so they get pumped and go straight into the sets.
Yes, and there's also research showing that that actually works, and also research showing that it has to be that kind of music, because if you turn on some romantic song or something, it doesn't quite do the trick.
I think I need to change the music I listen, because sometimes I'm listening to like Disney music. I think that doesn't really help.
Well, if that gets you going, there is also research showing that self-selected music in general works well, and music that you don't like, that you actively dislike, can even reduce performance, presumably because you're just annoyed or you feel poorly because you don't like the music.
Yeah.
For more videos like this, subscribe to the channel.